Let's say I do.
Okay.
Don't worry about it.
Well, hello everyone. Why don't we call and get this meeting started? Call the meeting to order. I'm Mac Patrick. I chair Public Health and Safety, and it's a joint meeting with Frank Kemp. He chairs Tgs&A. So welcome. Why don't we go ahead and get started? We have a quorum, and you will be having a quorum, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Do you want to go ahead and do your minutes, or
All right,
should we?
with reference to the agenda that we all should have. By the way, this is a joint meeting. I slip every once in a while. I call it a joint committee. And it's not a joint committee, because if it was a joint committee, then it would have to have its own minutes and agenda and everything. So we're still in our committees. It's just a joint meeting. If I slip and use the wrong words, you please correct me and don't fall into the same trap. As such, there are minutes here for public health and safety. So you want to
Sure.
do that?
Yeah, just we last met on October 16th, 2023, and without objection, I'd like to approve the minutes. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, thank you.
As far as TGSA met on November 6th, and you all have or can get a copy of these minutes. Does anybody have any corrections or modifications to that? I'd like to thank our clerk, David Bain, for putting our minutes together, and David will miss his train, so he'll be a couple minutes late. Do I have a motion to approve it? Fine, and all in favor? Very good, unanimous.
Okay.
Item number 2. And Harry is
Going to the caucus for
he's
District
playing the
5.
quorum master. He's going to
We
go
have it now.
help District 5 get its quorum.
Do you want to go around the table and have each other introduce?
Yes, now here we have a mystery guest, right up here.
Former RTM.
Oh, would the mystery guest check in, please?
Yes, former RTM member, proud RTM member for 8 years. My name is Monica McNally, and I was your former first selectman, and now I'm on the Board of Selectmen. And I'm here tonight in regards to the noise ordinance that you're discussing.
Thank you. Jim?
Jim Cameron, District 4, member Public Health and Safety.
Christine Castles, District Board Member, Public Health and Safety.
Jackie Miller, District 2, member of Public Health and Safety.
Joe Michelli, District 4, TGS&A.
Good evening, I'm Bill Clarkson, District 1, and I'm here for Public Health and Safety.
Hi, Jessica Cahill, also District 1, TGS&A.
Brian Rayhill, District 4, Public Health and Safety.
And Gail Holt, District 2, TGS&A.
Hi, I'm Rachel Taylor, District 6, and I'm Public Health and Safety member.
Beth Pope, I'm District 5, Public Health and Safety member.
I'm Mac Patrick, District 5, and I chair Public Health and Safety.
And Frank Kemp, Chair TGSA. Well, what brings us together this evening is a request from the Board of Selectmen back on September 5th that we develop some legislation that will help with the problems of noise in town. And the little handout that you have coming to you is all we've got to work with. Is a minimalist request, which is good because it gives us opportunity from the Board of Selectmen for us to develop an ordinance that helps us all solve the problem. Take a look at it for a moment. It has to do with garbage trucks, commercial landscaping, and its enforcement. And we are lucky to have Selectman McNally here to give us some of the background of how we arrived at this point.
Okay. Well, as your former first selectman, I got a lot of comments, and in this case, a lot of complaints about different noise. And it ranged from everything from garbage trucks leaf blowers, landscape equipment, construction work, church bells, train station, dogs. We even had a request to the PD, to the police department to be able to allow putting a speaker on a car and driving it through neighborhoods to give the sermon on Sundays. So that was just one, but my point is that we did have a lot of people that reached out, and so the Board of Selectmen made the decision to look into this and to see what we could do, and we decided we voted unanimously to ask the RTM to create an ordinance. And I'm pretty familiar with creating an ordinance. The three of us worked very closely on the bag ban ordinance, which was really interesting, and I think you will find this whole process very interesting. You will hear from a lot of people, and you'll get a lot of feedback on all sides. So I encourage you to enjoy this process. But I also realized from that situation that a little bit of guidance would be good. So the Board of Selectmen worked on this, and instead of looking at different equipment or the creator of the noise, we decided a better focus would be to recommend that you take a look at timing of noise. And I think we would all agree that if you're having a barbecue on a Sunday, or you're doing a first communion or something, it would be really good to know that your neighbors won't be, having a lawn service active at 3 o'clock on a Sunday and disrupt your event. So that's kind of where we were thinking, but we recognize that this is just simply guidelines that we're giving you on this. But we, Mac, Frank and I work very closely on this, and so I wanted to at least be here for the beginning to get help you maybe get a feel on what this whole process will look like going forward.
Here we are.
Good?
Okay.
That's enough?
I think that at first there was a sort of shock that the guidance was so minimal, and then there was a realization that, no, it allows us to work through the problem. Mm-hmm. And when we actually present a resolution to the RTM sometime in the next couple of months, and we'll talk about a schedule, we can be fairly confident that we've developed recommendations from consensus and some research. Now, I have a handout which is a list of possible tasks that we can undertake. And I don't want to have anybody upset that they didn't get a preview copy of this or have a chance to, because the ink is still wet on this. It just developed.
And it keeps changing.
Because somebody had to do it. I'm going to talk through let me have one back. You got it? Okay.
We have more.
Talk through the different tasks, and you'll notice at the top of it's called a draft report. We have normal concerns that paperwork that we all have, like I guess the attorneys call it work papers, or client, in a completely different situation, client work papers. Well, it's just it's not really parallel to what we're working on, but we work with draft reports that we can feel confident are good work papers among us, but not necessarily going down to the Darien Times or broadcast around for controversy. When we want to have controversy, we'll have it. We'll have it on a draft that we prepare, or something after we've done our not after we've done work, but while we're actually doing our work. So in that spirit, there's a list here which we can quickly go through. The first, it says committee members are encouraged to volunteer. That means everybody is going to pitch in, whether they work, whether they're available to help do interviews during the day in town, and because of work commitments they may not be. In that case, they'll get a task that can be done at other times. So, leading off, it would be good for us to have a database of where the complaints have been coming from. How frequent are they? Are they in particular neighborhoods? When that research is done, just as in our blight ordinance, we don't really want to know the people's names. Maybe not the street address, but generally sort of map this out as to where the complaints are. And then as we move forward, we can take that under consideration. It might have to do with commercial versus commercial zone versus residential zone. It may have a high density population versus, or what do you call it, 5 and 6 acre plots. And it also has to do with, let's face it, the golf courses. The golf courses are extensive, but they also abut private property. And so, we're going to have to deal with that. We're going to, in some way. So, on task 1, we just need to get a timeline of the complaints and get a good database. So if somebody says, well, you don't know about something that's happening over at Royal School. No, I think we can find that out. Task number 2 is to interview our town officials and department heads about their experience over the last couple of years with handling complaints. Everybody thinks that we have a working nuisance ordinance, but if you go to the Muni Code, as we all will, but the Muni Code is where the official record of our charter and our code available right through the town website. I look and you do a search on nuisance, there are about 10 items that pop up. And they're in this section under horse stables. And anyway, so they're odd things that our town officials have had to deal with. Often you hear about nuisance of barking dogs, or even, last week I've heard about a rooster.
And in my talking to people, there's many instances where everyone says, well, there's hours of operation for contractors in town, and there really aren't. If you look through the ordinances, there's really nothing there. There might be conversations between, the town hall, public works, and contractors, but there's nothing concrete. So that's something we're gonna be looking at.
So our department, so the selectmen, is it the buck stops there? That's the place where everybody complains to is one of the selectmen or the first selectman. But our other departments have had to field complaints as well. And often they pass them on. You've got Public Works, you've got the Department of Health, you've got Planning and Zoning. Each one of the fine department heads that we have had experience with this, and we should benefit from their advice or their accounts. Again, so we're not blindsided as we prepare the legislation. Task 3, we could do the same thing with our neighboring communities. Greenwich is turning themselves inside out with noise ordinance. It's a complicated situation, and even tomorrow they have a hearing to revoke their noise ordinance. But then they have a meeting next Monday night, which is the same as our own RTM meeting, to vote on an enhancement of that, having to do with electric leaf blowers and gas leaf blowers, hours of operation. Anyway, Stanford has just has had an ordinance for a while. Norwalk has just put one in. Westport has been very progressive in their ordinance, and yet there have been no as far as I know, there have been no citations issued. So it's like a paper tiger, in my view, but I don't know about it. But in my view, it's like a paper tiger.
Well, those are the kind of things we want to find out.
Yes, and we can find that out by some contact teams. We hope that people will be pairs and go and interview the relevant parties in the towns. And some places, like in Greenwich, it's the Department of Health is the carrying the ball. In Westport, I really don't know, but a little bit of research will probably find a party who is responsible for drafting and putting the legislation in usually the RTM or equivalent, and another party that's responsible for enforcing it. And they may not be in complete harmony with each other or in sync with each other. We want to find out the facts of it, because again, we want to be well informed when this comes to our colleagues in our town and the town people, so that we know what we're talking about.
Well, I think, Monica, you mentioned, I watched your meeting, that you have had some kind of high-level talks with Chief Anderson, and he's willing to work with something as long as it's, I think you were even-handed, I think is the word you used.
Even-handed hearing officer, yeah. I think that the enforcement issue is a big one, and I definitely think you want to put that at the top of your list of talking to the chief.
Mm-hmm.
And I would add Fairfield. Fairfield just finished an ordinance, and the body that's enforcing that, I believe, is their kind of the equivalent of our sustainability committee. So not a lot of teeth to it. So the enforcement is always a big issue when it comes to these, blight, the bag ban, this kind of thing. So I would suggest reaching out to the chief.
According to state statutes, they had the enforcement with the police department in conjunction with the health department, is what has been cited. I'm also, I don't see it here, but in terms of research, I'm interested in going to the literature and seeing about noise and the impact that noise has on people and their hearing, and also like through OSHA, and kind of have good scientific basis for this ordinance, in conjunction with all the other kinds of interviews and whatnot for research.
Okay. So as we move on from item number 3, the last sentence is we want to find out what's really happened in the communities, because what we will do is to supply the teams that go out to do the interviewing with what we think is the text of the ordinance that's in effect. That's what we can do, and you may find when you visit that, oh no, we've amended it, or there's a pending amendment that's coming in to change it around. So that falls under the category of finding out what's really happening before we get drawn in, as we get drawn further into this. Item number 4, an important thing that we need to do fairly quickly is interviews with the contractors, your landscaping contractors, and your waste hauling firms, at least to get to know who the players are. Right now, Ed Gentile has said that we know who the waste haulers are who are local, who do their tipping at our transfer station. You have to be, get a permit and pay their dues and all like that. But then there's a whole other class of waste haulers who come in and see their customer. Good evening, David. Come in and service their customers and then take the trash elsewhere. And we don't technically know who they are. We can kind of guess the name. But we need to kind of find out who will be influenced by this. Again, get to know who they are before the legislation is written. And then as we have a draft of tentative hours, check to see how that is going to work in the commercial environment.
Well, specifically with waste hauling, basically all the complaints that have come in are about early in the morning waste hauling. No one's complaining about them coming at 10 o'clock at night, because they just don't do that. It's all really early in the morning. And there's reasons for it that we need to explore. My best guess is if the schools, for example, they come really early, and maybe 4 in the morning, pick a number, but that's because they want to get there and get out way before the buses start running.
They have to tip. They also have to get to a dump and tip. And a lot of the dumps, like Darien-'s, are closed by 3 o'clock in the afternoon. So pick it up early and get it out of your truck and tipped before they close the gates on you.
Monica,
Could
could I just ask one question? Sorry.
Please.
I just watched the September 5th meeting, and you guys talked about exemptions for municipal work. Is hauling from schools under that umbrella, or is that separate?
That would be under it.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
So even if we did have an ordinance,
You would have some carve-outs,
okay,
absolutely.
okay.
So for town projects, like school, like DPW.
Okay.
And if we look at the other towns' legislation, which we will do, become familiar with it, but carve-outs are for parades, carnivals.
Yeah.
Other things that I guess we don't think of right away, but as you kind of dig into this, there's certain very logical public works activities. For example, when there's a big storm, and Public Works has their supplemental contractors to help out, get the trees off the road, and no matter what time of day that is, to clear the roads and, all that kind of, well, that's a carve-out.
But we are just talking now, I thought, not about construction. I thought we were simply talking about the noise from leaf blowers and early trash collection.
We have chartered to do what we want to do. It's the RTM, it's the RTM.
Noise
The
is
Board of
noise.
Selectmen
So like this
has
could,
given
so
us a
there's
guidance.
like barking dogs, party.
Snowplows.
Snow blowers.
At some point, we will have to kind of draw a line as to whether the problem with kids having parties is going to fall under this,
Oh, yeah.
or whether, what do they call them, house party things? Whether that's going to fall under this type of, they have to draw a line someplace.
Yeah.
And that may be on the nuisance side, and it may require us to enhance the nuisance definition,
Yeah.
which is certainly our it's not. Anyway, to answer your question, it's RTM.
That's what,
for sure.
okay, so it may expand beyond this.
And it's interesting, you mentioned barking dogs, because I have heard some complaints about that recently, and, I have to believe that falls under, we have an animal control officer in town, and I have to believe that person would be the one to address that. But again, we're starting from scratch here with a clean slate, so.
I've interviewed the town animal control officer, and he cannot stop a dog from barking.
Yeah.
But we can, I mean.
And then I think we're also gonna have to
Right.
get down to a definition of noise
Right.
and how you measure it, how you can measure it objectively and not subjectively. Frank's parties are awfully loud, but, will I cut him some slack if he invites me over next time? I mean, I have a decibel meter on my phone. Every cop has a phone that probably has a decibel meter on it. And then we're gonna have to get into that whole quagmire as well, too.
It's Frank.
Again, this
back
is
on the
system
topic
orientation.
about roosters.
Excuse me?
Someone made a complaint about roosters,
Yeah.
and so we got to refer them to animal control, because there was no ordinance.
As we move down this road, we're going to have to, we should produce an FAQ, because we'll have issues that we'll talk about and come to an agreement on. And we want to let the public know what our working agreement is, and how do you do that? It may be by just say, here's the issue and here's what we're recommending. So, for example, rooster problem.
Yeah.
Let me finish with one more point, and then we're going to, go ahead.
Yeah, somewhere in these, that I've read a whole bunch of stuff on all the things that we've discussed at some point, that there were ordinances or, something on the web. As far as the roosters go, certain areas in town were prohibited, but in the larger area, where they had more land, say up by the Merritt Parkway, up that way, they were allowed. So house parties, I think it was until around 10 o'clock at night, and then they had to kind of quiet down. What was the other thing that somebody mentioned was the...
Barking dogs.
Sorry?
Barking dogs.
The barking dogs, yeah, so I read about that too, that if a dog was barking outside for 20 minutes, then that could be cited. But inside the house, they couldn't really do anything about it.
Where did you see this?
This was all on the stuff that I read that's no longer
Where,
around.
in Darien?
I believe so, as of far, it wasn't the state, because it was so circular,
Well,
yeah.
see, now, this is an example of things that we have an opportunity to lock down.
Yeah.
Because we ought to have,
Seem to be
you know,
missing.
the party line, not party line, but the school solution, so that we can answer the public's questions responsibly.
Yeah, so
That's
when I
good.
joined the RTM a number of years ago, I was reading all these things to educate myself, and I don't know where they all went.
I'm sure they're still around. There's been some updating on the website. I think
Yeah,
it's in
I
progress.
must
so.
have, yeah, but there were some things that are addressed, and the noise ordinance was 8 AM to 8 PM, 365 days a year, so.
Well, good news, it sounds like we have time to chase that all down.
Yeah, I think it needs all revised anyway a lot. so.
Now, just moving along here, item number 5 is, while these other activities are going on over the next couple of weeks, there should be some R&D on a generic ordinance that's a structure that will fit into our code, onto which various carve-outs or specialties can be hooked. In other words, have let's call it a framework, a framework on which the details can be hung. And so that's kind of a parallel effort to these other activities we're talking about. Now you'll notice a red line. Above the line is stuff that we will begin to work on. Below the line are some tasks that will come up, but they're mentioned here, but it's too preliminary to start talking about the conduct of a public hearing. On the topic of public hearing, for reference, and won't mention it again because it gets boring, public hearings are required if you're changing the charter of the town. There's a whole sequence of timing, and after the public hearing, a certain amount of time has to go by before it comes up to the RTM. For a change, an amendment to the code, or a new section of code, this may be a new section unless we go. Anyway, public hearing is not required. But what Monica and I found with the plastic bag ordinance, and we found with the blight ordinance, it was prudent to have a public hearing and get as much input from people during the process as you can. Not required, but we're very, very likely to do it. And organizing that hearing is task number 6. We've got to pick a date, we've got to set up some ground rules, and by the time that hearing is held, it's prudent not to have the hearing for people to make speeches, but for have them make comments on the legislation that's on the table. So it implies that we've got to do our work and have a draft. Draft is a draft, it can be changed, of course. But have the comments directed to the draft, and that's exactly what we did with some success on bags. When somebody was wandering around with other topic, we kind of said, well, could you address your comments to the topic of the evening? Delicate, because you want to have public participation. You don't want to cuff them around, and you want to have them have the opportunity to talk. But, okay. Task 7 is taking into account the public meeting's comments, blending them in to whatever draft is on the table at that point. And then topic 8 is a review by town council and preparation for presentation to the RTM. Because when we go to the RTM, it would be desirable to have most of the members of the body familiar with the topic and not a lot of naive questions at the meeting. Certainly questions are entertained and questions are good, but if they have some gravitas, good, somebody just new to all this, so we want to make sure that they know what this. Now I bulldozed this through just to kind of explain what this draft is and the red line across it. The floor is open to other topics that we ought to put on our task list.
Well, Frank, I have 2 questions about the topics that you put here. First, with respect to coming up with a kind of a generic ordinance, could, and maybe this is a question for town council or an assignment for town council, could we get copies of the ordinances of Norwalk, Stamford, Westport? And
You were on the
I'd like to
train.
cherry pick, you know, I'd like to cherry pick the best and, you know, the ordinances that
David,
are
you're
already
on
out
the
there.
right, you're certainly on the right track, and what we said just before you came in is we anticipate that we'll have some volunteers to go and visit these other towns, and preparing them for their visits,
Right.
we are going to provide them with what we believe is in effect in that community.
I mean, someone
find a
should
different-
grab the ordinances, and it'd be great to get a chart, you know, to
As-
kind of like talk
As
about
well as
this
a
particular-
checklist.
I think he's volunteering. I think he's volunteering.
Well,
it's nice, David.
Of course, I have a checklist of things that could be in an interview.
I'd be happy to do a comparative analysis of the relative statutes, but we need someone to.
Yeah.
But I need someone to fill the statutes.
David,
That's
it's
right,
actually,
David, thank
actually not that difficult to come up with because the
They're on the
state
website.
already has that listed on the state website. You can find it easily. And
Okay.
it lists in alphabetical order every town.
Yeah,
in
the
the
Muni code in
state.
some of these towns is not as easy to find as it is in
Yeah,
Darien.
but but what it is,
They're all
some
on
of these,
deep.
they're on,
Okay.
and it's, I've looked at a lot of them.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Darien, it was so circular though. You know, the
Just
state
refers back
says
to
to
the
look,
state.
yeah, look at
Yeah.
Darien, and the Darien says, go, you know, go to the state, so.
Because we don't have one.
And then
Very
my
circular,
second
yeah.
question is whether we
Yeah.
have any learning on whether we can distinguish between commercial noise, you know, i.e. the lawn service companies, the garbage companies versus residential noise. If someone wanted to mow their lawn, you know, early in the morning or, you know, do whatever.
I think,
You know.
Monica, you guys talked about that a
Yeah,
little bit.
so to your first point, you might want to reach out to Kate Bush first. Because when the Board of Selectmen was looking at this, we compared what different communities had on their books already in this,
Okay,
right?
great.
So, but to your second point, you know, distinguishing between commercial and residential, that's a pretty easy. I would just caution you to think this through a little bit before you get caught up in the weeds, because you will see when you compare all of these ordinances that are already out there, that it starts to get very, very detailed on some of them. So that's why the Board of Selectmen tried to give some guidance on thinking about timing, because I forgot about the roosters, I forgot about the person that has a problem with 95, and his solution is to shut it down. Which, we could talk about that forever, but you don't want to get caught up in all of these, you know, individual items. So I would take a look at the big picture, and I think if you take a look at the ordinances from other communities, I would put that more towards the beginning of this process rather than to the end, and I would definitely start with Kate, because she's done some of this legwork already.
Great, thank you.
I would also add, I think as we're thinking about this broad strokes, to your point, high level, as we contemplate, you know, the type of noise or the source of the noise, in addition to the days and the hourly acceptable rates where we would absorb this noise or allow it, or whatever the language is going to be. I did look around toward other communities, as discussed in our last meeting. Westport was like a glaring example for me in terms of carve-outs. There are carve-outs for storm cleanup, town property, you know, more than 20 acres. Great Island would obviously apply in this instance, in our case. But the other thing, when you contemplate time, there's certain blocks of time in the year where certain activities are completely prohibited. So I would just raise that as we're like up on the high level. I think that's probably where we start, in addition to defining basic, right? What is noise? What are the decibel levels? Looking at the state statute, which in this case allows us to create sort of whatever we'd like, but I think there's some framework there to all of your points that we can draw upon and cherry pick the best of the best if we go that route or don't, or learn from the horrible mistakes. And the other thing I would add is I watched a lot of these prior hearings in the other towns, listening to public comment, listening to comments from businesses, and there's a lot to be gleaned from that as well, I would say.
Not to be blindsided when we come down to the last minute. So, now,
We'll let Jim had a comment.
yeah, other comments on the a task list.
Well, first of all, I have to thank the Board of Selectmen and its courageous addressing of this issue by kicking it down to us. And I mean that only somewhat facetiously, because I think this is better written at the RTM level, closer to the community, with committees like these than it would be with the Board of Selectmen, et cetera. But the relatively short list of suggestions that they had, I also watched that meeting live, as a matter of fact. Garbage truck. What's a garbage truck? A waste hauler is referred to one place. What's a garbage truck? We also have to think outside of, you mentioned that there are mentions of horses in one of the ordinances. What technology is going to be developed in the next 5 years that we haven't thought of, that is not in the ordinance, if we carve it out too specifically, about Amazon drone delivery?
Yep.
We have to think of a
I
larger.
didn't see that one coming. Yes.
Neither did we see the horse's demise coming either, but I think we have to not just limit ourselves to what we have right now, and think, okay, we've solved that problem, and then suddenly, a noisy drone comes in, and it's nowhere mentioned in the ordinances either. Golf course mention that you made, I think, is interesting, because that's a commercial property, and are they allowed to blow leaves, cut grass at 6 o'clock on a Saturday morning? If commercial is exempted or otherwise not defined properly in the ordinance?
Jim, these are very good questions.
Right. You raised the issue, and I hadn't even thought of golf courses, but I think it's a great opportunity for us. This is going to be our bag ban. This is going to be our blight review board. These two committees are going to have a chance to really do something that affects people's lives in this town. So let's go at it. Thank you.
Frank brought it to my attention, but we as the RTM actually attempted to come up with a noise ordinance 15 years ago. And you're actually quoted, and it was voted down. And Frank's doing a little more research on it, but the actual ordinance was very detailed into trying to measure decibels and whatnot. The health department was to be involved in it.
What was I
And
thinking?
It was 8
failed
pages
miserably.
long.
Yeah.
Well, the technology was a lot different back then too.
Yeah.
Well, to that point, do we think about, or was there a case in the current codes anywhere or ordinances where we have like a revisitation built in, like every 4 years we'll revisit this policy, like in service to keeping up with technology developments?
And that was something that you mentioned in the
Yeah.
meeting,
Yeah.
a sunset provision for
Yeah,
the.
that was a request.
Well,
actually.
as we tried to get on top of this in the last couple of days in preparation, a couple of weeks in preparation for this meeting, there's topics that just kind of come out of the blue that were just like drones or such that we just haven't really focused on. The golf course thing is out there because they're high taxpayers, and they have, if you're running a golf course, you have certain tasks that you've got to do. So, but they also abut private property.
But here's another one, Frank, so you're talking about the cleanup, right, or snow plowing? Snow plowing is always carved out, just so you know. So the golf course, actually, skeet shooting at the golf course at Weaver, I had people come in to talk to me about that, so it's not just the cleanup.
And what did you tell them?
I told them that I'm gonna talk to Frank.
I had that, I could see that coming.
That's going on all day Sunday.
But-
Believe me, I know.
In the interest of-
Wait, and I just wanted to comment to, yes, there was a request by John Zagrodsky to consider a sunset clause or a 1 year on this, and then a reevaluation. And I think that you will get, and I encourage community outreach. I think talk to people. If I've learned anything in this business, it's get people's voices heard. That is going to help you so much on the back end. So spend your time definitely reaching out to the community. Have the RTM email, get it in the newsletter, talk about it at the RTM meetings. Get people to come and tell you the type of noise and let them vent a little bit, right? Because they want to be heard. Sorry, I know that was an easy one, but they do. It's a noise ordinance. They do want to be heard. So that would be my last.
If we can get any more comments about these major tasks, good. But keep it in the back brain for a moment while we move on to the next topic. And I'm going to hand out 2 pages. Pick one of each. Pass them down.
Oh, wait a minute. Okay, thank you.
We have 2 pages, a draft timeline, and because some questions will come up about which RTM meeting are we targeting to, here's the thing that we've all seen about the Rules Committee and RTM schedule. So put that aside for the moment. We'll have to talk about that at some point. Again, this is draft report, it's draft. It is not set in stone. As a matter of fact, the ink is still wet on it. And so let's just say, for starters, that from January and February, we do this research. Now, we may go back for second interviews, we may ask for another bite of the apple, or we discover topics. I'm sure we will meet sometime in those 2 months. We will meet to probably refine what our requests for information are. But on March 1st, we ought to be able to release a draft of the text, so that by March 11th, I just picked the date, we have a hearing. If we need a second hearing, it would be shortly thereafter. Whether we have that second hearing or not, again, it's open for discussion. One suggestion was that we have a virtual meeting as well. And maybe we ought to do that, but maybe we ought to, instead of having a virtual meeting for people to make their comments, invite them to send their comments in an email to us, and we have a central repository. And I talked to Krista today to confirm that we have an email address called darien@dariencT.gov. And that was used effectively in the bag of comments, and we would open that up. So if somebody can't come to the hearing, they're invited to send us an email to that address, and that, as well as public testimony, would be consolidated into a summary to make sure that our views are accounted for.
Yeah. And other committees do that. Planning, zoning does that. They take comments in writing without the person coming to the actual meeting.
So with the input, maybe by April 8th, we could present the draft ordinance to the Rules Committee. Because Rules is the gateway to the RTM. It always meets 2 weeks before the RTM to establish the warning and the agenda. So rather than having a target as being an RTM meeting, our target is, you have to lead the target a little bit, about 2 weeks to come to a Rules Committee. And then after the Rules Committee, we never can tell what they'll come up with. The Rules may spin us around and send us out the other direction, but if April 8th is a Rules Committee meeting, April 9th, finalize it, if we can, and send it over to Town Council. Now, I will say that from the other legislation that we've worked on, Town Council was involved very early in the process to kind of look over our shoulder. But it's so good to work with Wayne on this stuff. But in a formal way, until the Rules Committee has approved what you're talking about, then it would be inappropriate to ask him for his legal opinion, sign on the dotted line. So what we're asking him to do is to make any comments or corrections that are appropriate, but also to frame our text into a resolution that is presented to the RTM. It has the whereas and the wherefores. I've always referred to them as the whereas and the wherefores and the therefore. They're called pleadings. And I think that you learned that in law school, which I didn't know, but the pleadings are composed to make it a solid document that goes out. So we would hopefully be able to submit this thing to Wayne by April 9th. Another Rules Committee meeting on April 28th. There's no Rules Committee on May 20th. The target being, well, as it says here, the May 13th meeting of the RTM is the budget meeting, and I think it would be foolish for us to try to collide with the budget, let them do their thing. So that leaves us June 3rd as the last meeting of the season before kicking things back to September. I included this as a reference to these dates, as to where we are. The rules, again, rules is our target, so that we can get something into the RTM.
Yeah, Jim.
And then Rachel. Are we under any particular timeline on this? I mean, what if this all takes a little longer? We don't have to get this done this year.
Answer the question yourself.
No, we're not
Go
under a
ahead,
timeline.
go ahead, answer. I know you've got the answer.
We're not under a timeline.
That's right.
We'll take as long as we have to get it right.
So you knew that, but you asked your question anyway.
I want it on the record, Mr. Chairman.
That's why we love you.
So that's exactly what I
Those
was,
rhetorical questions.
to add to that, I was just thinking, there's only 13 days here to incorporate and could discuss all the public comment, et cetera. That doesn't seem, given like the long scope of this project, to be sufficient.
Well, this is just a high level.
Yeah, no,
Yes,
right,
yes.
yeah, no, I know, it just seems like that's truncated compared to,
I mean, this could go into next year,
yeah.
Yeah, I just had two questions. Regarding this generalized email account, does that go to all RTM members, or would that just go to the relevant committees working on this, or maybe we don't know at this time?
Your
but
question is?
The general email account
I
referenced here
believe it goes to Krista, and then she distributes.
accordingly.
Yeah.
I see, okay.
She's the gatekeeper.
Understood, okay. And then, yeah, I kind of agree with both of you in a sense, like, obviously it's a draft, right? We're just contemplating how this might work and could go longer, but I would just, something sticking out to me, I know for a fact, like, other boards and commissions in town have requisite amounts of public meetings they must have when contemplating and passing policy or regulations or ordinance, in this case we call them ordinances. Is there anything that governs this process for us?
As we know, a public hearing is required for a change of the charter. This is not that. This is a change to an ordinance, and having a public hearing is completely optional. I believe we will choose to have a hearing for all the benefits that accrue from it. It's our choice.
There's really no downside to having a hearing.
No, I agree.
No, particularly if somebody comes out of the woodwork at the last minute.
Yeah, I agree, and I think having multiple of those is helpful, right, with enough time and space between so that you're actually performing the function of them, which is absorbing the comments, taking them for contemplation.
Typically, I mean, I remember the meetings on the bag orders, you ask people, you don't want to hear the same thing. If somebody's comments are exactly what the person said in front of them, so you try to move it along.
Yep, thank you.
Sticking with the public hearing, my only suggestion would be that you encourage the landscapers and waste haulers to attend your first public hearing.
That's a good point.
I wouldn't, their voice is just as important as anyone else's.
One idea was to have a hearing for the public and then have a hearing for the businesses that are affected by this.
Yeah, I think they should.
And that's a sort of, I can see the advantages of that, but I also see the disadvantages of that. So I have to we will talk about that because we're not, but remember the red line here on the task list? We're working above the red line for the next month or so. And then we'll get down to this topic. One topic is out there is if you've got the contractors who want to vent about this thing, give them a chance. Of course.
I would assume we're going to hear from them throughout this process because their businesses are being directly affected.
The sense is that they may be reluctant to come to the public hearing.
Mm-hmm. I don't think so.
And it's hard for us to define this is public and this is for contractors. So we have to kind of thread that needle.
I think the public, that's, average citizens should hear from the contractors.
Right. Yes.
And the
Yes.
contractors should hear
Yes.
from their non-customers as well too. I'm all for having, it's a public meeting, anybody can come, please, it shouldn't turn into a debate, it shouldn't turn into a yelling session. I think it's an information exchange opportunity, as we saw with the bags as well too. I mean, we had all the supermarkets represented, as well as those that wanted to, you know, ban all plastics in the world. And somewhere in the middle is where we came down with something that seemed fair to all.
And let me guess, it's gonna be on Channel 79.
Live and in living color, and repeated over and over again.
In high definition.
Yeah, well, can't promise that, but you know, we'll do the best we can.
You gonna have the landscaper sponsor it?
We don't accept those
Maybe not.
sponsorships.
All right, with reference to our agenda, we're doing it here. We've reviewed the specific recommendations from the selectmen, and we've had in-person visitation, which is great. We've talked about the topics, we've talked about the schedule, and now on point number 5.5 is how we're going to set up these teams. One way would be to pull out my yellow pad and go around the table and ask, what are you going to do, what are you going to do, what are you going to do? And I don't think that would be productive. Having us all volunteer for stuff, people tend to volunteer for the easy stuff. What we could do in the next week is that Mac and I will contact members of these committees to find out whether they are available in the daytime in the town or not. If people are working, they're working, and then we'll try to give them something to do on the weekends or in the evening. Then compare our notes of who can do what, who's eligible to do. Because the contact visits with our own town officials and the contact visits with the other communities are very important. So if we set up the teams to do that, to get people to volunteer, that doesn't sound right, that's a paradox. You can't get a person to volunteer.
They're voluntold.
We can make assignments.
We make an offer you can't refuse.
Push pull. So the first step is to find out whether you're eligible or not. The second step is I think that Mac and I will try to figure out where we would like people to visit and set up some guidelines for that. I think I mentioned earlier, I'd like to prepare sort of a checklist when you walk into an interview. Talk about anything you want to in the interview, but there are certain things that probably when you come back to report to these committees, you'd like to cover certain things if at all possible. And we will provide you with the text of what we think is current in that. So with that in mind, you may get a call or an email from Mac or me in the next couple of days, just to get that straightened out, and then we'll try to set up some teams to go and do the research. With that in mind, item number 6 on our agenda is selection of a date for, again, a joint committee meeting to report our notes, surface issues, and move this thing forward. Open for suggestions as to when that joint committee meeting ought to be.
Are you talking about before the holidays or after the holidays?
After.
Oh, clear, because the interviews
We're
are
only
going to
2
go.
weeks away from Christmas.
Oh, yeah, the interviews are going to go on January and February.
Okay.
Do we want to have a date in the middle of the interviews to see how things are going, maybe?
I would think we'd want an organizational kind of meeting kind of earlier in the process, right? Once you've had your discussions with everybody, see who's available to do what, and kind of have more of a game plan as to what we're gonna do. So should we be meeting like the first week or two in January?
Well, we certainly could, but once we have the people identified who can do the work during the daytime, we
Not much to talk about.
can make some suggestions as to which towns they go visit and turn them loose.
I think David's got the right idea. I think you have an organizational meeting and you think about, for instance, it's budget season, right? So I would kindly ask that when you think about interviewing the department heads, you keep that in mind and you give them a list of questions to contemplate, to think about before you go and see them, and you be very respectful of their time. Of course, that's not just for Darien, that's gonna hold true for other communities, right? So So the whole budget season is definitely something to think about. So what I would do is more like what David is saying, is before you have an organizational meeting, you get some of that stuff ironed out.
Fair enough. How about the first week of January?
What about Wednesday, January 10th?
The true confessions. I'm gonna be out 8th to 12th, 8th to 14th, something like that. That's why I said first week of January, because second week of January I'm gone. And I know you all have schedules, too. Of course you have, we all have
not be here either.
commitments.
So then how about the week after? Whatever that is.
I think the week after is better because I think
Sure.
town party caucuses must occur within that first week
Okay,
into the second week, but.
so what is it, 15th, 16th,
So that would be the 17th.
17th? Okay.
Yeah, the 15th is Martin Luther King Day, so.
So
17th seems
Well-
okay.
That's what, Wednesday?
Yes, Wednesday, January 17th.
Okay.
7:30?
Should we check on the room here?
The date that's on the floor is?
Wednesday, January
Wednesday,
17th?
Second.
Yeah, I'll try to get it here.
Wait, Frank has a problem with that.
Yeah, we.
I'd like to be at that meeting.
Oh, you're not available then?
On the
I don't know why
17th?
I arrived back. So-
Yeah, I'm not
Oh,
available
okay.
either, but that's okay.
Well, it seems like we're
It-
letting
it-
6
we-
I mean,
weeks.
it's a
Let's
week
flip it
ago.
into the next,
It's a
we
week
flip it into the
before
next
Wednesday,
week.
The 23rd is.
Frank, now we're letting almost 8 weeks float by, or at least 7 weeks before.
So should we
really
go
kinda
earlier?
get in our-
Wednesday, January
All right,
3rd?
what about winding it back into the, Boxing Day is the 26th,
Right.
you know, day after Boxing Day.
That's
I'm
tough.
gone
December?
then.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know it's around.
That's Christmas then.
That's
Yeah,
the
you
big
got- it's gotta
between
be after.
Christmas and, yeah,
It's
people
gotta be
are
Everyone's
out
out of town.
That's gotta be after January.
You can do
I don't
Wednesday,
mind-
January
I don't
3rd
mind
or
waiting till
January
late
3rd.
January, but, you know, we're not gonna get on the June schedule at this rate.
Are Thursdays out? Like, must it be a Wednesday?
Doesn't have to be Wednesday.
That's
They're
Thursday.
fine with me.
And when
Thursday's fine with me too.
When are you
No,
going?
but the third is a
I
Wednesday.
arrived back on the 17th.
And
No,
when
I'm
do
just
you-
saying,
I'm just saying,
Wednesday
it doesn't
doesn't
have to be a
Right.
Wednesday.
It doesn't have to be Wednesday.
Okay, so who's available before January 8th?
Maybe, maybe not. I might be.
Okay, all right,
Maybe.
so who has a
7th, 6th, that
calendar?
would be the 5th, or the 4th
January-
is a Thursday?
2, 3, and 4 are Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday of
Yeah.
that first week. Now, January
You
2,
see-
everyone's gonna be grumpy, so maybe.
David's suggestion of having, what I was thinking of, we would make the assignments and people would go do the work and report back. But where we are here, David's suggestion is that we meet once, just to calibrate what we're going to do. So an earlier, not pro forma meeting, but it won't be a long meeting.
Right.
It will be a checklist review, maybe we need something to add to the checklist and tune it up. And then also just check who's going to Stanford and who's going to New Orleans.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I would encourage a meeting on the 3rd or 4th.
3rd or 4th.
Good for me.
You like a Thursday, 4th?
Thursday the 4th gives people a little more breathing room to come out of the holiday.
Okay.
Can do.
Okay.
4th? Okay.
Thursday?
Yeah.
Thursday the 4th?
Yeah. It'll be here, but, well, I'll put in for a room somewhere, but I mean, it'll probably be this room. 7, is 7:30 okay?
Yes.
Everybody want 8?
7:30 is good.
Everybody want 7?
No,
No.
no.
7:30?
Is this the Thursday the 4th? It's okay.
It's Thursday's the 4th, yes.
I'm going to ask if anybody would like to go backwards and talk about that task list, so that Mac and I can start thinking about the types of things that we ought to be doing as part of this project. And if you can't think of it tonight, send us an email.
I would just say, I think as far as like the fact-finding component, where we're doing outreach to other towns and so on, you know, David's observation of like pulling the ordinances is like legwork research that can be done in a stationary fashion. So I think the differentiation between like research, like clickety-clack research versus like field research, I think is important to discern.
Yeah, because we want to talk to someone in Westport. How's it going? Oh, it's crazy. Yeah, you know, it's not
Right.
working. It's better than we ever thought it was going to be.
Right. So there's like the
We
human
create a
anecdotal,
better
and there's how
impression.
did it play, right? How did it play in the public? How did it play in the press? How did it, right?
We'll
What was the
create a
fallout,
better
if any?
impression on the people that we're visiting, if we have their ordinance,
Yeah.
you know, we know.
Right, do the prep and
We've
then do the
we've done our
paperwork.
part to,
Yeah.
I think it would be good to have that now, sort of before the holidays, or at least leading up to the meeting, so we can kind of look at the,
Right.
so we can look at the
Yeah, well-
universe of things that are to be contemplated.
we'll be
Especially
doing-
if somebody's done.
We'll be working behind the scenes to get ready for the 4th, so that the, and distribute information, of course.
Right.
So that when we do get together the 4th, it will be useful.
Yeah, and a lot of these other ordinances, they had a lot of publicity associated with them, right? So the Fairfield one's the most recent, and that was a hot topic. It was very contentious. The police department weighed in. So there's a lot of information online that you're gonna be able to find out, not just from actually sitting in front of somebody. It's just a question of who wants to do all that legwork and pull that, because there's a wealth of, yeah.
Jim?
Oh, and the anecdotes of the not so distant past, when we had the success of the research on the bag ordinance, I recall that Monica was in a snowstorm, working the post road at the different commercial establishments to cap off.
The good old days.
Of what they
This is
thought
gonna be
about
way
that.
more fun.
Jim, a little Eva in the snow.
Jim.
Are there any other comments?
Yeah. I was just gonna say, I don't think we necessarily have to limit ourselves to the Gold Coast here, Greenwich, Fairfield, Stamford, New Canaan, Westport. What's the name of the organization that Darien belongs to that represents town government?
Oh, that's a great, Westcott, that's a great.
Well,
idea.
Westcog, but also, isn't there a one in Hartford for all the municipalities in Connecticut?
So there's another organization called COST, it's Council of Small Towns.
That's the one.
And that has, we have 169 municipalities in Connecticut, and there are, I think, 112 in this organization, and they're going to be more, it's based on size. So the other one is CCM, but that's every community in Connecticut. So that, I don't know if you would go there, but COST is a good one, and you could check with Westcog. You can make one simple phone call to Francis Pickering, and he'll be able to tell you what they have in their data bank for information.
I'm just thinking, there might be some other municipality further upstate that has addressed the issue and come up with wording that we here on the Gold Coast have
I'm gonna look at
not adopted.
I'm gonna look at Wallingford, because I saw they had a whole bunch of ordinances there. One was noise, but I didn't check into it. And a lot of people up there are Yale affiliated.
Put her on that committee that's going to do the research.
Well, and your other point about the definition of noise, that's something that you can do a dive on right now.
Yeah, and being a public health person myself, mainly in health education, you look at the impact of noise on health and quality of life. And so if we get some kind of data on that information from the literature, that would be for medical journals or whatnot, that impact, that will really give us some good base from which to draw some of these ordinances to.
Absolutely.
Jim, I think the point of looking at the towns around us is that a lot of these landscapers work in all these different towns. Landscapers aren't unique just to, so I think that's why it's helpful to look, if they're already dealing with New Canaan's ordinance, for example, you said Fairfield, that's helpful.
We'll be making life easy on them, because we'll just be following along with what they have to do everywhere else. We're doing them a favor.
Well, but David, so the thing with the garbage haulers is that, what I heard anyhow, what we heard in the selectman office is that because we don't have a noise ordinance, some of the haulers come to Darien first
right.
to get their work done before they go to our neighboring communities that do have an ordinance. I did not hear that from any hauler, I just heard that from
Right.
Makes sense.
speculation.
And we don't have a definitive list of the haulers that,
No, we don't.
right?
Well,
Because
we know the locals,
like-
but we don't know the owner.
definitely one of the haulers that I've had, that I now changed to a local, but it's Win Waste Innovation, it's out of New Hampshire.
Win
They
Waste
come
is-
whenever they want.
Now, Win
like-
Waste was city carting, so
Right.
they're gonna be a handful of haulers, that's not gonna be a problem.
You don't think so?
No,
Okay.
No, you'll be able to identify, absolutely. I would
Okay.
start with Public Works, and Ed will be able to give you an idea
Got it.
of who's pulled a permit to tip in Darien, but you're not looking at 100,
Okay.
no, not at all.
Any other questions? If you don't have them now, shoot them please by email to Matthew. And can I entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All in favor? Okay.
Thanks to Channel 79, very patiently taping us, and our meeting is over.